Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth and final session of American English Live Teacher Development Series 5. My name is Lauren, and I'll be your facilitator and host today. And I'm working alongside my colleagues Heather and Abigail, who are behind the scenes to help you throughout the session. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to any first-time viewers today, and we are also so happy to see all of you who have attended sessions with us before. It's great to be with you all today. Today, we'll be talking with our host, or our presenter, Neil Anderson, about a four-part framework for fostering and maintaining student motivation. We'll also explore the relationship between teacher motivation and learner motivation. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's begin with a look at these photos featuring teachers from around the world as they participated in sessions and discussed webinar topics during Series 5. We love to see teachers learning together and using strategies presented in AE Live sessions in their classrooms. So please share your photos by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org or by sharing them on social media. If you share via social media, tag us at American English for Educators. We may feature one of your photos during the next series. Today is our last Series 5 session. We sure have explored a lot of really exciting topics like critical thinking and using comics and graphic novels in the EFL settings. Today, we'll take a second look at the topic of motivation. Which sessions have you enjoyed so far? Share your responses in the chat. We hope you've been able to use these practical ideas discussed throughout the series. So as a reminder, here's what to expect today. Each session is about 60 minutes long and is often related to an American English e-teacher massive open online course or a Teacher's Corner theme on the American English website. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments too. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address all of your ideas and experiences. So please do share your thoughts using the comments feature or the chat box. When our session comes to a close in about an hour, you will have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the session, we'll share a link in the comments and at the top of this post. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 of the questions correctly. Once you have successfully passed the quiz, you can expect to get your badge by an email from badger@badger.io in about 1 week. We hope you'll join us for our upcoming American English Live Teacher Development Series 6, which will begin on September 4th. You can see the session dates here. During the next series, we will explore topics such as building digital literacy skills, project-based learning, and communicative grammar teaching. More information will be available soon on the NING and on the American English for Educators Facebook page. And you can use the link in the chat to receive reminders about the series. And now for today's session, Enhancing Learner Motivation in the EFL Classroom. If we want motivated students, we must have motivated teachers. This session provides opportunities for participants to explore how to enhance learner motivation. We will first address our own motivation as teachers, and then we'll explore ways to enhance the motivation of our students. Next, we will discuss Dörnyei's framework for motivational teaching practices. The framework includes 4 essential components: creating the basic motivational conditions, generating initial motivation, maintaining and protecting motivation, and encouraging positive retrospective self-evaluation. These 4 components can guide teachers in transforming the language classroom into a powerful learning environment. And now we are pleased to introduce our presenter, Neil J. Anderson. Neil is a professor of English language teaching at Brigham Young University, Hawaii. His research interests include second language reading, motivation in language teaching and learning, language learner strategies, learner self-assessment, and ELT leadership development. Neil served as president of TESOL International Association from 2001 to 2002. He was the 2014 recipient of the prestigious TESOL International Association James Aladdis Service Award. In 2016, on the 50th anniversary of the TESOL International Association, he was recognized as one of the 50 individuals who has made a significant contribution to the profession of teaching English to speakers of other languages. A huge welcome to you, Neil.
Thank you, Lauren, and I extend a welcome to all of our participants today. I've been looking forward to our opportunity to interact today and discuss the topic of enhancing learner motivation in the EFL classroom. We as English language teachers are part of one of the most exciting professions in the world because daily we have the opportunity to influence the lives of the students that we work with. I'm looking forward to our discussion today, and in particular, in meeting our session goals. There are 3 things that I'm hoping that we can accomplish today. First, as we finish today's session, you'll be able to justify why motivation is an essential part of our planning for student learning success in the classroom. Second, we will explore a 4-part framework for fostering and sustaining motivation in our classrooms. And perhaps most importantly, number 3, we will examine practical ideas for applying the framework in our classes.
Great, let's get started.
Okay. As we get started, I think it's vital that we all understand a definition of motivation. So let's throw out this first question to our participants. How do you define motivation?
All right, everybody, we'd love to hear from you. How do you define motivation? Okay, we see lots of answers coming through. Connecting with students is one participant's answer. Supporting one another through instruction. We have connecting with one another. We have lots of the theme of connection coming through.
Connecting and supporting each other are key to understanding motivation. Motivation comes from the Latin verb movere, which means to move. So motivation is what moves us to take action. And I think that it's important for us to understand that definition because as students take action and we take action, we're demonstrating our motivation. A second question I'd like to throw out to our participants. Why is the topic of enhancing learner motivation important for us to consider in this webinar? There are lots of things you could be doing right now. Why is this topic important for us today? Let's see what you have to say.
Yes, let's see what you have to say. Why do you think the topic of enhancing learner motivation is important for us to consider? We look forward to hearing from you. Okay, we have one comment saying, getting students interested. Providing authentic information is interesting for students, from Ruzana. From Ahmed, giving zeal and zest. I like that. That's great.
Ahmed, that's a great response.
Yeah, so I guess the theme here is that if we provide our students with topics that are interesting, that they will be motivated.
Yes, and we want to make sure that we're doing all that we can in our work as English language teachers to be motivated ourselves and to help our students to be motivated in the learning process. One additional question that I want to throw out to everybody, and this one I think is really important. Whose responsibility is it to motivate students?
That's a great question. What do you think, audience? Whose responsibility is it to motivate students? I'm seeing a lot of, it's the teacher's responsibility. Some people are saying parents, family, community. It seems to me that everybody plays a role in motivating students.
Lauren, that is perfect for you to be able to synthesize the comments that are coming in, and everyone is identifying what I think is central to the response of this question. Everyone in an educational environment shares a responsibility for student motivation. The students themselves need to take responsibility. The teachers need to take responsibilities. Parents should play a role. Administrators at a school should take a role. Anyone involved in an educational setting or context can play a key role in helping to motivate our students. And today, we're going to look at ways that that can happen.
Great.
Zoltán Dörnyei is the leading authority in our profession of second language learning and teaching in regards to the topic of motivation. He has provided this quote to help us understand that early in our work with motivation, no one was actually taking responsibility for motivation of students in the classroom. So look at this nice quote from Dörnyei. He is highlighting here that by and large, promoting learner motivation is nobody's responsibility. Teachers are supposed to teach the curriculum rather than motivate learners, and the fact that the former cannot happen without the latter is often ignored. That's kind of a past view of motivation. Now look at this transition phrase here from Dörnyei. He says, my guess is that it is every teacher's responsibility who thinks of the long-term development of his or her students. So every teacher should be playing a role. And then when we look at that more closely, we should understand that teachers have to actively think about fostering and motivating student motivation. And it should be a part of all of our classrooms. As we're planning for success in the language classroom, we should be thinking, how am I going to motivate my students today? And the framework that we're going to look at today will provide us with some key ways that we can do that.
That's great. And to your point, we have Jenny, who says a motivated learner is a willing learner. So this is going to be a great session because I think that's true.
That is true. We want willing learners. We want students in our classrooms that want to be actively engaged in the discussions that are happening in the classroom. If we want motivated students, we must have motivated teachers. So I think one of the first keys in starting this discussion about motivation is for us as individual teachers to be asking ourselves, what motivates us to get up every morning and continue our work as English language educators? Why are we in this profession? Why do we want to influence the lives of the students that we work with? If we can show our motivation, the students are going to sense that, and that synergy that will develop in the classroom will help everyone to learn and be better.
That's a great point. I agree.
Let's now look at Dörnyei's framework. And let me give you a global overview of the framework, and then we're going to look at each of these 4 components in a little bit more detail. The first area or component of Dörnyei's framework for motivational teaching practice is creating the basic motivational conditions. With this particular concept, it's important that we understand that creating the basic motivational condition is fostering the big picture motivation in the classroom. This is where we're able to establish the vision of success for the course. We can talk to the students about goal setting and the goals for the course that they're enrolled in. So this first component helps us look big picture at motivation. The second component of Dörnyei's model is generating initial motivation. And often as teachers, we get the first and the second components of this model a little confused because they sound so similar. While the first component is creating global motivation for a course, generating initial motivation gets us down to the day-to-day learning. We want to create interest in learning the material that we have planned for today. We want to communicate the goals for learning. We want to make sure that students are excited about being in class today. The third component is maintaining and protecting motivation. This is one of the most challenging because we want to be engaged in sustaining motivation in order to help students reach their goals. We need to prepare to provide rewards for our students and provide solid, positive reinforcement to their learning, because language learning is a long process, and not one that can happen in a short period of time. The fourth component is encouraging positive retrospective self-evaluation. I really like Dörnyei's choice of the word retrospective. That means to look back and to evaluate. We want to provide a positive environment for students to be engaged in journaling and to reflect and review their student work, particularly if they are making mistakes in the classroom. We want a positive opportunity to use the errors that are generated in class to propel us forward in our language learning process.
That's great. And kind of looking back at your first point where you talked about a vision of success, we have Diana Lopez, who says, motivated teachers plus motivated students equals success. Thanks, Diana.
Oh, Diana, that's a great comment. Thank you for making that comment. Let's now look at each of these four components, and I'm going to share with you something that I do in the classroom in order to accomplish these four things, so that you get a little bit of a glimpse into how this framework influences my preparation for teaching and my engagement with students in the classroom. When I'm trying to create the basic motivational conditions, I want to initiate in-class discussions about motivation from the very first class session. When I'm working in particular with lower level students, I pose a question for them within the first few minutes of class. And I ask them, why are you studying English? And I ask them to respond to this phrase, I am studying English because, and I get the students to, as best they can in a lower level class, to tell me why they are studying English. And then we begin using that information in order to help the students understand what they can do to help move themselves forward in accomplishing their goals. If I know why they are studying English, then I can use that information throughout the entire course to help students accomplish their goals.
That's great. And I think students seeing other motivations from other students and kind of thinking about all of the options for learning a language, or specifically English, is really motivating in and of itself. So that's great.
That peer-to-peer interaction is often really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
With higher proficient students, one of the things that I do is relate language learning to being on a roller coaster. Perhaps you've seen or ridden on a roller coaster like the one that you see in the visual now. Roller coasters are often at an amusement park, and roller coasters provide steep ascensions and descensions, and often have loops like you see on the screen to provide some excitement for participants at an amusement park. Learning is much like being on a roller coaster, because we have our ups and downs when we're learning, and sometimes we feel like we're going in a circle. But if we think about learning and motivation like the roller coaster, it's going to give us a new perspective of how we can accomplish our goals. So with the students that I work with at higher levels of proficiency, I've prepared a video clip that I've divided into 4 segments. We're going to watch the first segment of this video clip. And as we watch it, I want you to look for 2 things. What is the name of this part of the cycle? And what color is this part of the cycle? Let's watch this part of the video clip.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Your ultimate goal. This roller coaster ride is very different from other roller coasters you have ridden. You have control over how high you go and how fast you arrive there. In order to arrive at your desired long-term goals and become your future L2 self, we must first have short-term goals. Let's begin with what gets this ride started and moving to your desired educational destination. You begin by deciding to participate in an educational experience. Now you've decided to study English in the EIL program. The power that drives the cart throughout the entire ride is your own motivation. Whose responsibility is it to get the cart started and moving forward? Who has control over the amount of energy that moves the cart? It is you. You have begun your quest for your long-term goal. You have demonstrated initial motivation. How much motivation do you have right now? Will you be motivated enough to make it up and around the first loop and accomplish your first short-term goal?
So you see here with this analogy of the loops, I want the students to understand the importance of goal setting, and I also want them to understand whose responsibility it is to be engaged in the learning process. As I introduce this video clip, I share with the students the process of goal setting, and we talk about ways to set good short-term and long-term goals for learning English. That's why it's so important that students have an understanding for why they are studying English and how English will play a role in their lives. As we think about this particular part of the model, I want to emphasize goal setting and responsibility. Motivation is the key, and you see that motivation was in the color green. As we watch this next segment, look at these same two questions. What is the name of the next segment of this roller coaster ride, and what color is it in? Let's watch this next segment.
Okay.
The second part of your ride. It will be the hardest but most rewarding part if done well. Going up the loop requires effort. Your motivation must be strong enough to push you up the loop. You must increase the amount of effort you put into your learning. You know that as you put more effort into your learning, you will be able to reach your short-term goal.
So our color is now blue, and the key word here is effort. As I'm working with students, I want them to understand that in addition to their motivation, they must put in effort. That language learning is not going to come easily. They need to be investing every single day in the hard work of language learning. So effort is an important key for them to understand.
That is true. And just really quick, we have a few audience members who are just really liking these video clips. Sarah says that it is a great idea to know their students' own motivation. So it's really important for teachers to understand that. And Maja Bean says students can relate to the roller coaster with life because of all of the ups and downs, which I thought was really nice.
Oh, that's a nice connection.
Mm-hmm.
Let's watch the third segment. We've got motivation in green and effort in blue. As we watch the third segment, look for the name of the segment or part as well as the color.
At this point in the roller coaster ride, you have exerted enough effort to reach the top of this loop. This point on the ride can be the most thrilling and satisfying part. You can experience the high and exhilaration of having achieved something by your own motivation and efforts. You must recognize the results of your efforts and motivation in a positive way.
So this third component of the roller coaster ride allows the learners to understand how important it is that they look at the results of their learning. So every time that we have a class quiz or even something as simple as an activity in class, I want the students to keep in mind that they're going to use the results of everything that we do in the learning environment as part of the motivational process. Results is in yellow, and as the video clip indicates, this can be the most exhilarating part, the most exciting part of the ride. Because as you have demonstrated motivation, and as you put forth effort, you can then begin to look at the results. Notice that we're not saying that those results need to be correct answers or positive results. Any result is key and can be exhilarating because that demonstrates that you're learning. Let's now transition to the fourth and final segment of the video clip. And again, watch for the name of this part of the roller coaster ride as well as the color change.
Next, on the way down the other side of the loop, you use your awareness of your efforts to recalibrate and to prepare yourself to reach your next short-term goal. Reaching your next short-term goal will require you to repeat the roller coaster cycle of more motivation, more effort, and increased vision to continue progressing and enjoying this educational roller coaster until you reach your long-term goals and become your desired future L2 self. Your future self is depending on your present self to create it.
I love that last line. That's so true.
Yes, our present self is depending on our future self is depending on our present self to create it.
Right.
So recalibrate is a really difficult and challenging word for even the advanced level language learners that I work with. And I've chosen this word purposefully for them to be able to learn a new academic word. I want them to understand that recalibration has the prefix re, which means again, and to calibrate means to set a standard or to set up a way that you are going to evaluate yourself. So recalibration provides an opportunity to reevaluate. So notice here with the visual that motivation, the green loop, is central through all the parts of the roller coaster ride. Effort takes place during the most challenging parts of learning. We want to use our results and celebrate the successes that are happening in the learning process. And fourth and finally, we want to use our results in short-term goals to recalibrate and reset goals as we continue moving forward towards our long-term goals.
And we have lots of comments coming in. Aline says motivation leads to success, which pumps adrenaline in. So I think she really agrees with the results phase. We have Akib, who said this was such a motivational video, amazing. Mari Chor says, wow, amazing idea. We can definitely use that. That's good news. Sophie says motivation is the key to success, no doubt. And many more positive comments coming in. So thank you all for your participation.
Before we move forward, I want to just pause and ask the question, why? So why am I using these video clips in my classes? Why do I ask the students what their reason is for learning English? I'm doing this in order to create the basic motivational conditions. These are activities that I do very early in a course so that we can initiate the conversation about motivation. And if with higher proficient students, I've had the conversation about motivation, effort, results, and recalibration, that conversation continues throughout the course. It does not end when we finish the first day of class. That's a thread that is woven throughout all of the rest of my lesson plans. Let's pause here now and get some ideas from all of you. What are some things that you think, or perhaps you already do, to create the basic motivational conditions in your teaching context?
Great. Okay, everyone, we'd love to hear from you. What ideas do you have for creating the basic motivational conditions where you teach? We have games, rewards, realia. That's a good one. That's a really good one. We have more games, some rewards, positive feedback is great. Lots of different ideas coming in. Thank you, everyone.
One of the ideas that I see that just flashed forward or on the screen was posters. I think that posters can be a really good way to initiate discussions about motivation, because then you can keep those posters in your classroom setting throughout the course that are a daily consistent reminder of the students about the key to motivation.
That's great.
Let's now transition to the second part of Dörnyei's model, which is generating initial motivation. Remember that in creating the basic motivational conditions, we're looking at global course level activities, not the day-to-day activities of motivation. Generating initial motivation is what we want to do on a day-to-day basis in getting students excited about the learning that will happen that particular day in our classes. Let me share with you some examples of things that I do. At the beginning of a new unit and or the beginning of each class session, I want to help the students see the purpose of the day's instructional objectives. So I write clearly stated learning outcomes on the board. An important thing to understand about writing clearly stated learning outcomes on the board is that the learning outcomes are different from a schedule or the activities that you're going to do for the day. The learning outcome tells the students explicitly why they're going to be engaged in activities during the class session. Let me share with you two examples of how I do this. With lower level students, I will write on the board, today you will, 1, match pictures and words, and 2, draw a picture of the word. So you see that I'm being very careful to put the verb in capital letters in blue, and I'm keeping the information very short and succinct for lower proficient students. You'll also notice there that there are 2 green check marks. Those check marks don't get added to the whiteboard until after the completion of the objective. So once we've done the matching pictures and words and the students are able to do that task, I add the green check mark. And then we'll use that same vocabulary that they've matched and have the students do some drawing activities. And at that point, I'll put a check mark so that before the students leave the class, they can see that we have accomplished the day's activities.
That's great. And Medley says that she thinks it's a great idea so that students know what is expected of them in class.
Oh, that's brilliant, Natalie. And that's one of the advantages of explicitly sharing your learning outcomes with the students. With higher proficient students, I develop a little longer phrase here and tell them by the end of this lesson, you'll be able to, 1, identify the main idea of our reading, and 2, justify your selection of the main idea. So notice that with both of these examples, I've tried to provide 2 learning outcomes. The first of these learning outcomes is rather foundational. If you think about Bloom's learning taxonomy, the first objective should be in the category of Bloom's remember and understand type activities. The second objective that is on both of these examples have what I call more extended opportunities. So we can link that to Bloom's taxonomy with the apply, analyze, evaluate, create activities. I want to make sure that there's some foundational activities happening, outcomes, and extended outcomes where the students are using the foundational knowledge in the classroom. So why is it important? for us to write the objectives on the board. I do this because I am trying to create initial or generate initial motivation for today's learning. And I have found that this is one way of many that I can generate motivation for being in class today. Let's open this up now, Lauren, and see what our participants, what ideas they have. What are some things that you can do to generate initial motivation in your teaching context?
All right, everyone, we want to hear from you. What ideas do you have for generating initial motivation where you teach? And while we're waiting on responses, Maja Bean said that writing learning outcomes on the board is useful for helping students to pay attention during class, which is a good point. Let's see, we have setting clear objectives in class, visualize the steps to success. That's great, I like that a lot. Let's see. Yes, we have a lot of comments talking about making sure expectations are clear, making sure objectives are clear. So I think everyone's on track with you.
I think I want to emphasize one more time that it's really important that students see those objectives written on the board. I want to keep them there throughout the class. Mm-hmm. And it's important that we have the objectives and see them as different from the schedule of events that are going to happen in class.
Right. That's a great point.
Let's transition now to the third phase of Dörnyei's motivational teaching practice, maintaining and protecting motivation. This is perhaps one of the most challenging because we want to make sure that when students are investing effort, the hard part of learning, that we're maintaining and protecting their motivation. Let me share with you an idea that I use when I'm working with students that I work with. I teach the students to establish motivational partnerships with others to support their learning. And I help students understand that these motivational partnerships can be with multiple people. The learner should be establishing a motivational partnership with herself, or with the teacher, or with peers, or with others. Again, with establishing the motivational partnership, the student is taking control over establishing the partnership. And you might wonder why or how would a student be setting a motivational partnership with themselves? By the time we discuss with my students motivational partnerships, keep in mind that they've already seen the video clip that we watched. And in that first segment, it asks the question, who is responsible for your learning? I really want students to be invested in understanding their own responsibility. So I emphasize having a motivational partnership with yourself is a really positive thing because you're the one that is setting your own goals, and you can set rewards for yourself. And you can engage in positive self-talk that will help you going when you need to invest effort.
This is a great point. Jenny says support is crucial to maintaining a learner's motivation. So these partnerships are especially crucial to learning.
Yes. Jenny, that's a really good insight because the learner herself is the one that's setting up these partnerships in order to support learning for the long term.
Exactly.
So why do I ask students to form motivational partnerships? I'm doing this to help them understand that maintaining and protecting motivation is central to the long-term efforts that we are engaged in the learning process. I'm sure that there are many, many ideas for maintaining and protecting motivation. What are some things that you do in your context?
All right, everybody. What are some things that you do in your context to protect motivation? We'd love to hear from you. While we're waiting, Hazrat said students also motivate teachers, which is a great point. And we have someone who just said, keep encouraging students. That's great. I think it's important to maintain that positive attitude and encouraging students as a partner. Taking responsibility helps students to stop blaming other, outside forces. So it's good for them to take responsibility for their own learning. Reinforcement, variety of class activities is important. Lots of great answers. Thank you for participating, everyone.
With maintaining and protecting motivation, it's important to remember that motivation changes. So the idea of that roller coaster ride, the ups and downs that are involved in learning and the ups and downs of life, we can now talk explicitly with the students about, remember what your goal is, let's protect that goal, let's look long term, let's make sure that we're doing everything we can today to lead to success in accomplishing your long-term goals.
I love that idea of short, sustainable goals, on the road to a longer-term, bigger goal. That's great.
Let's now focus on our fourth and final component of Dörnyei's motivational teaching practice. And here, Dörnyei invites us to be engaged in encouraging positive retrospective self-evaluation. Remember that the word retrospective means to look back. I also really like the fact that Dörnyei emphasizes looking back in a positive way. Sometimes students get negative about experiences that they have while they're learning a language. And I want them to make sure that they're using their evaluation in positive ways to accomplish their goals. Let me share with you 2 ways that I engage in encouraging positive retrospective self-evaluation. With lower level students, I want to allow them with an opportunity to reflect on the learning. And so I will have very simple I can statements. So think back to the example that I gave earlier, where we write the objective on the board as a way to establish initial motivation. In that particular class session, at the end of class, I have the students look at these 2 I can statements. Today, I can match pictures and words. And notice that their response is very simple. They only have to circle the smiley face or the frowning face. For lower proficient students, this works very well. So they're going to respond to I can match pictures and words and draw a picture and words. I'll collect the papers from the students and just quickly review how many smiley faces and how many frowny faces the students circled for this particular class session. I can then use that information as I plan the next class session.
We have lots of participants chiming in saying that this is a great idea. It's great for busy teachers with very large class sizes because they can get more feedback, but it's very simple, easy to scan. Medley says, you're right, self-evaluation helps students have an idea about their own progress and also what they need to do to practice more. Thank you.
Medley, you've hit something that's really, really important. Sometimes students expect the teacher to provide the evaluation to the students of how they're doing. And in this component of the motivational model, we want the students engaged in positive retrospective self-evaluation so that they can see how they are learning. Let's look at an example of something that I do with higher proficient students. I use what is known as a 3-2-1 summary. And when you look at this, you see why it's named 3-2-1 summary. The first question requires 3 responses. The second prompt requires 2 answers. And the third prompt requires 1 answer. So in this particular example, I might ask the students, list 3 things you learned today from your peers that you probably would not have learned on your own. Then list 2 things you learned from me. And finally, what is one question that you would like answered before moving forward with your learning? Now, a comment that was just posted earlier about teaching with large classes, one of the things that I want to, a little trick that I want to give you if you're working with large classes and you do a 3-2-1 summary, collect all the papers from all of the students in the class. But that doesn't mean that you need to read all of the 3-2-1 summaries. Go through quickly and pull out some so that in the next class session, you can share back with the students some of the things that they learned from each other, some of the things that they learned from you, and 1 or 2 questions that they have about that particular day's class that they want answered. I have found that students don't necessarily need to know that I'm not reading all of the comments, but if I'm responsible and am using the information in some way in the next class session, it allows us to be able to process the information as a way to review before moving forward with the lesson.
That's a great point. And, you know, I know we're all busy as teachers, but if you get some spare time on your hands, you can always go back and read the others. But it is important to, you know, kind of get a summary and at least share with the students that you're looking at the feedback they've given you.
One of the things that I do with either of these options, with lower level students or with higher level students, if I don't feel like the class went particularly well, then I'm going to invest a little bit more time in reading the students' responses to try and help me figure out what did I do poorly in class today that led to my not feeling like this was a successful class.
Right. That's great. Jenny says that this is similar to an exit ticket, which is a great point. And we have so many people chiming in and saying that they really would like to start trying this and using it regularly in their own classrooms, which is awesome. We hope you do.
So a key question for us to ask here is, why do I do a 3-2-1 summary? Or why do I ask the students to respond to the I can statements? We're doing this in order to encourage positive retrospective self-evaluation. We want to provide students with opportunities to self-assess their performance in class on that particular day. And I'm sure that there are lots of things that teachers can do in different contexts. What are some things you do in your context? And we've seen some of them, exit tickets.
Right. Okay, everybody. So we'd love to hear from you. Do you do anything in your classrooms to encourage positive self-evaluation? Let's see. I'm seeing more exit tickets. What Laura says, I ask students how much they have learned at that point, and she has them rate each other using a range from 1 to 10, and then they have to explain why they feel they've scored in that way. That's great.
Getting that why question is a really good idea, because when the students provide a self-evaluation on a scale like from 1 to 10, you want to know why they've given them that rating. That's essential in this positive retrospective self-evaluation.
Great. And then we have some people saying reflective journals. And then Wilder says that they do an activity where students actually use what they've learned, and then they can kind of see through action how much they've learned, which is great.
That provides a really positive way to reflect on your learning.
Right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for all of your great responses.
Let me just provide a more global summary here of the 4 parts of the roller coaster ride, as well as the 4 components to Dörnyei's model. Remember that with the motivational video at the beginning, we've got motivation, effort, results, and recalibration. So during an entire course, I want to use those concepts to help the conversation about motivation happen every class session. And when I am generating initial motivation or creating the basic motivational conditions or engaging in positive retrospective self-evaluation or maintaining and protecting motivation, I want to make sure that I'm thinking about ways that I can explicitly help learners move forward in accomplishing their learning goals and their learning outcomes.
Great.
I now want to challenge you as the participants. I want you to take action. What is one thing that you're going to do within the next week to take action on what we have discussed today? And perhaps most importantly, how will you hold yourself accountable for completion of the task? If you know someone else who has participated in this webinar today, commit to them that you will report back to them in a week and share what you have done. If you are watching this webinar and you're by yourself, you can share what you've learned from this webinar with another teacher in your school that didn't watch the webinar, or maybe share this with a friend or a spouse and tell them what you're going to do as a result of having participated in the webinar today. Webinars are great professional development opportunities, but if you don't actually implement any of the ideas and follow up with them, then your professional development is not as robust and positive as it could be. So let me challenge you to take action.
Yes, and all of those viewing with a viewing group today, be sure to make some commitments so you can have some accountability with your viewing group members. We have so many responses coming in. A lot of people are really wanting to start implementing the 3-2-1 activity in their classrooms. And Sahar says that they would like to set short-term and long-term goals. Malik says that they would like to share with their colleagues, so that's awesome. We think that's great. Speaking of partnerships, Dila Fruz would like to engage in a motivational partnership. That's great. Thank you, everybody.
So keep in mind that as language teachers, we need to be protecting and maintaining our motivation, just like we are encouraging students to protect and maintain their motivation. So I like the idea of teachers establishing motivational partnerships. And there are so many good and easy ways that you can do that. Find another teacher that perhaps is in a very different teaching context than your own, and begin sharing with them what you do in your setting in order to engage in motivating yourself and in accomplishing your own professional development goals. You need to be setting short-term professional development goals that lead to your long-term professional development goals and keeping a sustained motivational practice as you move forward with your own development.
That's great. We still have a few minutes left, so I'm going to share a few more comments from our audience. Diana says that they plan to write objectives every day so that the students will be aware of them. Imelda says they will encourage students to self-evaluate. Gergana says, I'm going to set clearer goals. So that's a great goal. We have lots of people chiming in and saying that they're so happy they attended today and learned more about motivation, both for teachers and students, because it is an essential part of education. And a motivated teacher creates a positive environment. I love that. That's so true.
That is true. Let me give you one tip for setting some clear objectives. If you just do a very simple Google search on Bloom's taxonomy and look for Bloom's taxonomy verbs, you're going to see verbs related to Bloom's area of remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. And from that list of verbs, it can help you narrow in and stay really focused on the learning outcome that you want your class to experience. And if you can choose a really good verb, one that clearly articulates what you want students to do, choose one from the remember, understand side of Bloom's taxonomy, and one from the extended apply, analyze, evaluate, create. And then you can develop foundational knowledge in the class, and you can provide extended learning opportunities with your class.
That's a great resource. Hazrat also says, invaluable session. We're so happy that you think so. And Freddie said, thanks so much for such a wonderful and fruitful session. I think everyone agrees that this was a very useful session, and we hope to see what all of these strategies that you're using in your classrooms. We're excited that you found the session useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Hold yourselves accountable, stay motivated, and most importantly, motivate your students. And I hope that we have future opportunities to engage. If you want to learn a little more, there's a great TESOL Quarterly article by Dörnyei and one of his grad students, which really emphasizes the importance of teachers and our role in motivating students. So this resource from the TESOL Quarterly might be of value. And then we'll also be posting some additional resources, including the video clips that you saw earlier in this presentation that you can use in your classes.
Great, that all sounds so wonderful. Thank you so much for guiding us through the process of thinking about the relationship between student and teacher motivation. And we have a better understanding through this session of the classroom applications and how they apply the 4 parts in motivational teaching practice model. After today's session, after today's session, we can better help our students identify and sustain their motivation as they reach long and short-term goals. We'd also like to thank you, our audience, for your lively engagement and participation today. We hope you'll continue to share all of your great ideas and experiences through social media, on our Ning, or with your viewing groups after the session ends. And don't forget, if you're with the viewing group, you can go ahead and make some goals